And could you bring the microphone a little closer?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. I'm David Devereaux. I represent the Confederation of Clubs of Washington State, and I'm also a member of the Outsiders Motorcycle Club out of Tacoma. I'll get right to the point, right to the crux of the issue. According to the Washington State Legislature and the Washington courts, the unlawful act of profiling occurs when law enforcement targets an individual displaying characteristics of a class that an officer believes more likely than others to commit a crime. In a nutshell, that's the definition of profiling. So the issue is simple. If law enforcement targets members of the motorcycle community or the motorcycle club community based on their belief that we are more likely than others to commit a crime or be violent, then profiling is occurring and it demands legislative relief. The issue is really that simple. Do they treat us like we're more likely than others to commit a crime? And if so, it demands legislative relief. It's absolutely undeniable that motorcycle profiling not only has been occurring for a long time, but is also occurring in the status quo presently. I think there's no better example than the experience that the motorcycle constituency has experienced on the campus of the Capitol over the past 2 years on our event called Black Thursday. Last year during Black Thursday, we captured video footage of a state patrol officer crawling through the bushes, obtaining all the license plates and personal identification information on every single motorcycle in the parking lot. We captured this on video, had our attorney write a letter to the governor and CC Chief Batiste. And in Chief Batiste's response to us, he said, well, of course this is what we did, but we did it out of the precautionary desire, because our belief is that when motorcycle clubs gather, there's a propensity for violence. This is a documented letter that he sent back to us. The reason that they justified taking all of the information down about every motorcycle in the parking lot was based on the State Patrol's belief that we have a propensity to be violent. That, by definition, is profiling. It couldn't be any more clear than that. This year, it didn't get much better. I mean, I don't see other constituencies who arrive at the Capitol in an attempt to capture their rights base have to deal with what the motorcycle constituency had to deal with. This year, although we didn't catch them crawling through the bushes because they had us park in the open, we did have to endure a massive amount of law enforcement presence. We had to walk through 4 law enforcement vehicles with a canine unit before we could reach the steps of the Capitol. That's the type of scrutiny that our community receives on the day we come to the Capitol to receive our rights base.
Would you bring that video to my office when you get a chance, because I actually would like to see that video.
As a matter of fact, I would bring the video to your office, and if you would desire to see it beforehand, a simple search in YouTube, we made it publicly available to everyone, a simple search on YouTube for Black Thursday 2009 will pull up the video and you'll be able to review the whole thing. In addition to that, it's also on the ABATE website of Washington State. If this type of discrimination is occurring on the grounds of the Capitol, what do we think is happening outside the shadow of our sanctity of government? What's happening is motorcyclists are regularly interrogated about their club affiliation and motorcycle organization membership. Almost every member of every motorcycle club, and most motorcyclists who aren't members of clubs, have experienced this type of interrogation and this type of discrimination. In fact, the State Patrol, under oath, admitted in November of 2009, this is literally 2 months ago, that not only do they profile members of motorcycle clubs in a determining factor in whether they pull them over, but they also admitted on the stand that they've been violating an injunction that the Superior Court of Thurston County granted in 2002 against a concept called Basic Biker 101, which is basically a manual that outlines very discriminatory practices on how to target motorcyclists. An injunction was granted against this manual and these tactics, and the State Patrol admitted on the stand that 7 years later they're continuing to use these practices. In fact, this officer wasn't even aware that an injunction was granted against these practices. That's very disconcerting, when even in the face of judicial reprimand, law enforcement continues to violate this practice. The basic belief that we're more likely than others to be violent or commit a crime is based on the stereotype that's outlived its usefulness. It's time to realize that Sons of Anarchy is a fictionalized TV program. The very fact that hundreds of motorcyclists and motorcycle club members can gather on the grounds of the Capitol and have a completely incident-free and peaceful protest in an attempt to capture our rights base proves that this is mythology and it's not true. Now, I want to address Representative Goodman's question about gangs, because over the past, 5 or 10 years in America, there's definitely been a refocused effort towards gangs. But as you all should know, a couple of years ago, I think 2 sessions ago, you passed what's called the Anti-Gang Abatement Act of Washington State. And what this legislation does, it gives you a very specific criteria for how you make the determination that an organization is a criminal street gang or a criminal gang. Now, to my knowledge, I know that no motorcycle club in the state of Washington in the court of law has been found to meet the definition of a criminal street gang by that legislation. We certainly haven't. None of the other motorcycle clubs that we're associated with have. And so even if it were true that once you are considered a gang, you don't have these protections, because certainly I think that that's true. Once you're considered a criminal organization by the letter of the law, then you don't argue for the protections that the rest of society gets. But that has not been done. And until law enforcement in the state of Washington uses the legislative tool that they have, the Anti-Gang Abatement Act, to define us as gangs, they can't make the presupposition that that's what we are. We're working Americans. I'm raising 2 children. I've been married for 15 years. I'm a very productive member of society, and the majority of people that I surround myself with are very productive members of society. You can't make a generalized presupposition about an entire community that consists of thousands of people because of a couple of highly publicized events of criminal activity or violence. Certainly, law enforcement doesn't take responsibility for every indicted or arrested law enforcement officer that reaches the media. That would be a ridiculous assumption, and the same thing is true about motorcycle clubs. So to answer your question, none of us are considered criminal street gangs by the definition of Washington state law. I think another important distinction that we need to make here is something that relates to what's called a pretextual traffic stop, because in every state of the union, to my understanding, but the state of Washington, pretextual traffic stops are not legal. They're taught in every other state that it's a tool of law enforcement, that if you can find a legitimate traffic infraction, then you can use that traffic infraction as a pretext to investigate your concerns about a particular individual who may be displaying characteristics of a particular class. Everywhere else you can do that, but in the state of Washington, we have something called Article 1, Section 7 of the Washington State Constitution, which guarantees our right to privacy and extends that right to privacy beyond the normal limited application of the Fourth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. As we all know, when the state constitution provides more protection than the U.S. Constitution, it gains preemption. In this case, pretextual traffic stops are absolutely illegal, even though federally they're taught as a tool of law enforcement, and even though in other states they're used as a tool of law enforcement. I think that it's a rock-solid case that profiling is occurring. It's reaching the steps of the Capitol, and legislative relief is absolutely demanded. It's necessary. I've been told that the fiscal note says that it would be an absolute minimal cost, independent of the fact that I don't think you can attach a monetary value to a legitimate civil rights-based claim. If there's any questions, I'd be more than happy to.
Thank you, and I think we'll hear from